side of that wall.
Tear down this wall, this wall, this wall. Tear this wall down. Tear down this wall. This wall.
You know, I've shared with you in a lot of previous messages that my ministry career really started out in campus ministry. When I came out of college, I got involved in a campus ministry organization. And on the job of every campus ministry staff member in the world is to train Christian students how to share the gospel on college campuses. So you imagine when you're on a college campus and you're working with students, the vast majority of students there, you might have thousands of students on that campus, the vast majority of them either don't know Christ, or if they do know Christ, they maybe grew up in a church and started a relationship with him, but then they get to the college years and they like bag that because they want to live the college life and sort of set that all to the side. And then you have this small, sort of faithful group of Christian students and who are serious about their faith and serious about Jesus. And one of your jobs as a campus minister is to train them how to tell the gospel message and how to tell their own story in a way that's winsome and connects to people. And so I would always invite students, hey, would you let me teach you how to articulate the gospel message to a lost person? And one of the most common responses I would hear would be this: Ryan, I'm not qualified for that. Like there would be a few students who would take it on and say, yeah, I'm all in. Go ahead, show me how to do this. But most of the students on the college campuses that I was involved with would say, I'm just not qualified. Like I know I'm supposed to share my faith. I know that's something God is leading me to do. But what do I do if I run into, let's say, an atheist student? And, you know, I don't have a PhD in atheism. How do I respond? How do I respond to people who challenge me on things? Well, fast forward many years later, and now I'm here as the pastor of our church and been pastoring for almost 3 years now. And you may not understand this or realize this, but on the pastor's job description, it's bigger than just preaching on Sunday mornings. We do a little bit more than that in our world. And one of the things that's on the pastor's job description is to identify leaders and call leadership out of people. So over the course of the journey, you know, I've had lots of conversations with people and invite people, hey, would you consider being a small group leader? You'd be amazing at leading a group in your home. Hey, would you consider being a team leader on Sunday morning? Like, would you join our dream team and help us to lead a team? And you know, some people take it on enthusiastically, but oftentimes I would hear the same response that I heard all those years ago on a college campus. Pastor, I'm flattered by the invite. I appreciate that you think you see something in me, but I'm just not qualified to do that. I mean, I can't lead a small group in my home. I don't know enough about the Bible. What if somebody asks me a question about the Bible and I don't have an answer to it? Like, I can't do that. And Pastor, what I've seen over the years of all demographics and ages of believers, of people who are followers of Jesus, is that we have a tendency to get stuck behind this wall that I call the wall of qualification. It's the wall that says, I'm not qualified for the next thing God is asking me to do. I don't have what it takes. I don't have enough knowledge. I don't have enough information. I don't have the right skill set. And so I'm stuck behind this wall. And I can't move forward with God because I'm unqualified for the next thing. I've heard that so many times that it's grown to be frustrating at times. And I want to ask you a piercing question this morning. Have you ever turned down an assignment from God in your life because you got stuck behind the wall of qualification? Because it felt like you were unqualified for the work that you really deeply sense in your spirit. God might be leading you to do something different, take a risk, but you felt unqualified. You know, we are on week 2 of this series that we're calling Walls. What we're doing in this series, we're identifying the things that get in our way, that prevent us from saying yes to God, the things that block our path, the walls that stand in our way. And I told you last week that we have all kinds of walls that get in our way. Sometimes we have walls of money. We don't feel like we have enough resources to do what God has asked us to do. Sometimes our walls are within our marriage. Or maybe we're not united with our spouse, and so we can't feel like we can't move forward on something because our spouse isn't necessarily with us. Sometimes our walls are our past. The brokenness of the past stops us from saying yes to God. Sometimes our walls are our present sin. We just have issues and junk and garbage in our lives that we've got to get beyond, and we feel like we can't say yes to anything God wants us to do because of our sin. Sometimes our walls might be disabilities, physical disabilities. They could be mental health challenges or problems. We've got all kinds of things that stand in the way. But I think one of the most common ones we run into is the wall of qualification. God, I'm just not qualified to do what you're asking me to do. I'm not ready. And because I'm not ready, I've got to turn this down. And I'm wondering if some of you have turned down an assignment from God because of the wall of qualification. You know, you may not realize this, but your life is made up of a series of assignments from God. Some of those assignments are short in their length and sort of small in their influence. Some of them are very long in their length and very, very significant in their influence that they have over other people. But if you're in here today and you're a follower of Jesus and you've said yes to Christ and you've decided Jesus is my Lord, He's not just my Savior, but He's my Lord and I'm going to follow Him, if that's you, then God is handing you assignments. They vary in length and magnitude, but God gives them to you. And your assignments kind of collectively in your life sort of make up your life's purpose. They make up what God has called you to do in this world. God gives you assignments in your family. God gives you assignments in your workplace. He gives you assignments in your church. He gives you assignments in your neighborhood. And the assignments, if you're faithful with them, will grow over time. That if God sees that it's demonstrated that you say yes to the assignments and you're obedient with them, He will give you larger assignments over time. The things He'll ask you to do will get bigger. The influence you can have will be greater. So God may have given you an assignment as a parent, for an example. Well, that's a lifetime assignment with a whole heck of a lot of influence. And that one never really goes away, does it? You're a parent for life. That is a big assignment. God might have given you an assignment in your neighborhood, but you're only there for, a year or two in that particular neighborhood. It's a short-term assignment. But when you're faithful with these things, God keeps giving you more. Now, in this series, what we've been doing is we've been looking at the life of Joshua. And the reason we've been diving into Joshua's story is because Joshua had to overcome so many walls on his journey to follow God. And today, we're going to see Joshua being given the greatest assignment of his life, an assignment for which he was totally unqualified. He was not qualified to do the very thing that God was going to ask him to do. But he chose not to stand behind the wall of qualification and say no to God. And he said yes to God, and God did something major with his life. Now, to kind of catch you up in the series, if you weren't here last week, let me just kind of give a quick recap. Joshua was one of the Israelites who had come out of the nation of Egypt. If you remember the story of the Old Testament, Moses was the leader of Egypt. The leader of Israel. Israel had been enslaved for 400 and some years in Egypt. God raises up this leader named Moses, and Moses' job is to get the Israelites out of Egypt. God uses Moses to bring a series of 10 plagues. He miraculously delivers the Israelites from the very awful oppression of the Egyptians. The Israelites cross through the Red Sea. They get on the other side of the Red Sea. We told you last week that they immediately got attacked by the Amalekites. And Joshua was a young man at that time. Now, our guess is that Joshua was probably 18 to 20 years old. And the reason is because Moses hand-selected him to be the leader of the Israelite army to fight back against the Amalekites. Now, I don't think Moses would have put his army in the hands of like a 14-year-old kid. I mean, I don't know about you. I wasn't ready to lead an army at 14. Still not at almost 38, okay? But Joshua must have been a great leader because Moses gave him the army as a young man. And Joshua is successful with his first big assignment from God. Because of that, he starts giving more assignments to Joshua. Joshua eventually gets another assignment, and it's an assignment to be a spy. So God had the nation of Israel, a whole plan for them to go and take over the Promised Land. The Promised Land is on the west side of the Jordan River, and the Israelites come up to the east side of the Jordan River, and Joshua gets this assignment to be one of only 10 people to go into the Promised Land and spy out the land. They cut down fruit from the land, they come back and they bring the fruit, the good fruit, and a report to the nation of Israel. Now, of those 10 spies, 8 of them spread negativity. They say the people over there are too big, they're far too numerous, they'll crush us in war. There's no way we can take the land God has promised us. Only two people give a good report, Joshua and Caleb. And so Joshua was faithful with his second assignment. God got so angry at the Israelites that they wouldn't go into the promised land that he was giving them. He was promising it to them. So God said, okay, you're going to wander for 40 years. Everyone in this generation is going to die in either the wilderness or the desert, wherever I take your nation. But nobody from this generation will inherit the land that I've promised. And so what happens is those Israelites have children, they have families, and it's the next generation of Israelites who gets raised up, who become the inheritors of the promised land. And of that nation, there is one Israelite who remembered Egypt, who made it into the promised land. And that was Joshua. There's one other person who did as well. It was Caleb, but Caleb was not an Israelite. He was a foreigner who had kind of joined them. Joshua is the only Israelite of his generation who had a direct memory of Egypt and slavery, who experienced the fruit and the blessings of the promised land. Everybody else died in the desert and the wilderness. And we come to the book of Joshua, chapter 1, and we open up the book, and God gives Joshua an enormous assignment. An assignment for which Joshua probably feels very, very unqualified. Here's how the story goes. It says, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I'm about to give them to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert Lebanon and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. God says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So, verse 6, be strong and courageous, Joshua, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. In the pathway, I want you to understand the magnitude of the assignment Joshua has just been given and the significant factors that would have made him feel unqualified for the job. The first thing you have to understand here is that Joshua is the oldest guy in the room by far. By far. If we assume that Joshua was 18 to 20 years old when he came out of Egypt, he is now 60 years old because 40 years have passed. 40 years. All the prime years of Joshua's life are behind him. His 20s, his 30s, his 40s, even his 50s are all behind him. He's now probably 60 years old. And what he's up against is that he is leading a nation of very young people. So we're not totally sure how many Israelites came out of Egypt. Our guess is maybe 2 million people had actually kind of grown into a nation over that 400 years of slavery. Those 2 million people come out. All of those 2 million, every one of them dies over the course of the 40 years. But let's just assume for a second they all replace themselves with one child. What that means now is on the east side of the Jordan River, where Joshua is getting his biggest assignment of his life from God. He's being asked to lead a nation where the average age of that nation is probably 20 years old and younger. This dude's leading a nation of teenagers. This is the worst youth pastor job ever in history. He has 2 million. Their average age is probably less than 20. These are young kids. And he's being asked as a 60-year-old man, a 60-year-old guy, to get him across the Jordan River, to go into battle against all the nations that are rooted in the promised land. And God's telling him, be strong and courageous. I'm going to be with you. Don't be fearful. The next youngest person, besides Caleb, the next youngest person is 40 years old. He's got 2 decades on the next youngest person, 4 decades on the average age of the nation. Joshua, I got to imagine, had to be standing behind the wall of qualification. God saying, God, why in the world me? I'm too old. Choose the 35-year-old guy. There's not even a 45-year-old guy to pick. Choose the 40-year-old guy. Choose that guy. Choose the person who's in their prime. Choose the person, God, who has a greater leadership strength than me. Choose the person who can go and fight valiantly in battle. I'm too old for this. And yet God looks at Joshua's lack of qualification and says, Joshua, that's nothing to me. That's nothing to me. Pathway, I want you to understand that when God gives us an assignment, he expects us to say yes to it. And when we feel unqualified, we have to understand that God's call is what qualifies us for the assignment. Do you understand that? God's call is what qualifies us. God is not looking at our lack of qualification. He is not looking at our inability to, publicly speak, or our inability to manage the finances, or our inability to lead people, or our inability to do whatever. God is saying, I will give you everything you need. You say yes, you stay close to me, and I will give you everything you need to follow this assignment. Not only was Joshua trying to lead a nation of kids, but he's got to take over for Moses. How would you like Moses to have been your predecessor in your job? That is not easy. I mean, this nation of people, none of them remember Egypt, none of them were there, but they had all certainly heard all the miracle stories from their parents. Their parents and their grandparents probably sat around campfires at night and told them about the plagues that came on Egypt, told them about the parting of the Red Sea. Moses is the hero of all of those stories. And now we get to the east side of the Jordan River, and the hero has died. Moses is gone. And Joshua has to take over for him. And he's got to command the respect of the nation, who all they've ever heard is the glory of Moses and what God did through Moses. And it probably feels like God's hand of favor is left because Moses is gone. And now Joshua has to take over. I'm just telling you, Joshua felt unqualified. He felt totally unqualified. But Joshua did not say no to the assignment. Listen to me, there is nobody qualified to do the job Joshua was asked to do. Who's really qualified to do this? Who seriously is qualified to lead millions of people into the promised land? We have a presidential election year coming up on us. Oh, joy, we get to go through that again. That's going to be a lot of fun. All of your friends are going to go crazy on social media, okay? It's coming in about a year. And we always ask this question every presidential election year, right? Who is the most qualified to be in the White House? And I laugh at that question because seriously, is anybody qualified to be the President of the United States? I don't care what kind of Senate position you've had, what committees you've led, what congressman you've been, how big the state was that you led as a governor. You are not qualified to be in the White House and to have the kinds of decisions that are going to come across your desk. And yet every 4 years, God calls somebody and he gives someone an assignment as a ruler. It's the way that God works. God is not looking at our lack of qualification. He's looking at his ability to provide. God's calling is the thing that qualifies us for his assignments. God goes on, he says this to Joshua, verse 7. Check this out. He says, be strong and, I love this, very courageous. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. He said, keep this book of the law always on your lips. Now, the book of the law was all the laws that had gotten unpacked in the previous 3 books of the Bible. Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Moses had received the law from God. He'd gone up on Mount Sinai and been given all this law from God. He came down and gave it to the Israelites. Okay, it was his job to institute the law. So God is saying, remember the book of the law. Get it on your lips. Here's what he says. Meditate on it day and night so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then, check this out, then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Here's the third time God says this. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. You see, God says to Joshua, Joshua, listen, I don't need your age. I don't need your leadership abilities. I don't need your physical strength. All I need is your heart. You keep your heart close to me. You meditate on the book of the law day and night, and you will be fully qualified to fulfill this assignment. You will lead this nation of young people into the promised land, and you will be prosperous and successful. Pathway, I think God is saying the same thing to you. When God gives you an assignment and everything in you wants to hide behind the wall of qualifications that, God, I'm not ready, I'm not prepared for this, God is looking and saying, just stay close to me. I've given you everything you need to be prosperous in the assignment. I want to take just a second to speak to anybody in the room who, let's just say 55 and older for a second. You know, if you're in here today and you're 55 or beyond, it may be very easy for you to kind of look back on your past and to say, my prime years are behind me. The years when God was going to do the most of my life are all in my past. My 20s are back there. My 30s are back there. My 40s are back there. And here I am, I'm in my 60s. Could God really do anything else with me at this stage of my life? Listen to me, if you've ever had that thought, I want you to know that it is possible that the greatest assignment of your life is in your future, not in your past. Because don't you know that God has given some of the greatest assignments ever to older people in the scriptures? Moses was not a young buck when he got his assignment. Abraham, not a young buck. He was in his 70s when he got his assignment. Joshua, probably 60 when he gets his assignment. Don't look back at your past and say, I'm disqualified to get another assignment from God because I'm too old. God's not looking at your age. He's looking at your heart. And He is ready to equip you and give you all the qualification you need to fulfill the next assignment. The greatest assignment of your life very well could be in your future, not in your past. Do you know that? You need to know that and believe that today. I want to take a moment to also speak to another group of people in this room, and that's all the ladies in the room. Ladies, I have a message I want to share with you, but to share this message, I need to let you listen to something. I'm going to actually play here in just a minute a portion of a podcast that I recently came across that I think could be very, very helpful to you. So let me kind of set this up. I listen to a lot of podcasts because I want to get better as a leader. I want to get sharper. And my absolute favorite podcast to listen to is from this guy, a guy named Carey Nieuwhof. He's the pastor of a pretty significant church in Canada. And Carey interviews leaders from kind of all spaces, leaders from the church world, leaders from the business world, leaders from the nonprofit world, and he pulls out leadership principles out of them and then tries to figure out how they apply to the local church. It is so helpful to me to listen to him. Well, recently, Carey interviewed a woman that you're going to see her. Her name is Nona Jones. And Nona has an amazing story. Nona was simultaneously a pastor's wife and the CEO of an alternative school system in Florida. Nona and her husband were sort of co-pastoring a church, and she was leading in the education space. And Nona was given a new assignment from God to do, of all things, to go to Facebook. And Carey interviewed her. She is actually the director of their faith-based partnerships. Now, you may not realize this, but a quarter of the world's population is on Facebook today. And many of those people on Facebook lead faith-based organizations, and Facebook wants to help them to be more successful. Nona was the person that Facebook called in to be the one to lead the entire initiative for the company. So I'm going to let you listen to about 3 minutes of a podcast, and then I want to address the ladies in the room.
Well, let me first provide a little context. So, I've actually never worked in technology or social media before I received a call, quite literally out of the blue, from Facebook to lead faith-based partnerships for the
So they
company.
recruited you.
Yeah, so just a really quick snippet of that. I was in a job I loved for 4 years. I was at the chief executive level of a statewide network of alternative schools. Thought I'd be there for the rest of my life. And God literally spoke to me one day and told me this assignment is over and gave me a
Whoa.
couple of months to resign. And He told me to resign at the end of the fiscal year, which was
Okay,
June 30th,
I gotta
2017.
stop you. I gotta stop you because whenever people say God told me to, you can understand that there's suspicion around that. Now, I've
Yeah.
had a handful of those experiences in my life too, but they're very rare.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was very specific and very clear.
So did you hear a voice?
It wasn't even a voice. It was like
Yeah.
let me put it this way. I heard it in my spirit, and what I heard was this assignment is over. And the reason I know it
Mm,
wasn't me is because I had planned to stay in that job literally for the rest of my life. I loved what I
right.
was doing.
Right.
But I prayed some more, and God told me to resign at the end of the fiscal year, gave me a very specific time, June 30th,
Wow.
2017. And so that day, I met with my boss. I met with her at 1 o'clock. I gave her my letter of resignation, and I'll never forget. She said, "So what are you going to do next?" And all I could say to her was, "I'll tell you soon," but I wasn't sure. And I left that meeting at 1:40, got in my car, was driving home. At 2:05, 25 minutes later, I got a call on my cell phone from an unfamiliar area code. I never answer those.
Hmm.
And I
Did
just
you win a
felt,
cruise? I'm
no, I
kidding.
thought that, I just figured it was a telemarketer. I really did. I was like, what is this 650? And so picked up the phone because I felt in my spirit, take this call. And the woman on the other end, she said, "Hi, is this Nona Jones?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Hey, I'm calling from Facebook." And I said, "That's funny because Facebook doesn't call people." I was like, "Who is
Hmm.
this?" And she said, "No, really, I'm calling from Facebook." And she proceeded to tell me how apparently the week before, Mark changed the mission of the company to focus on community building, and that one of
Wow.
the communities that the company wanted to focus on was communities of faith, and that my name was given as someone that they should talk to about leading this work. And so, 25 minutes after I resigned from my job in faith, I got a call from Facebook out of the blue for a job I didn't apply for. I lived in Florida, got the call from California. And that's why I said, I tell people, I'm like, I've learned that God meets our faith at our level of obedience. No reason to just resign from a job I loved,
Yeah.
except that that's what I felt God told me to do. So I like to start there because I think it's important to have that context when I'm answering the question, what do I see for churches when it comes to Facebook? Because I believe that I've actually been assigned to Facebook for the purpose of ministry.
Okay, isn't that an awesome story? Nona Jones was leading at a significant level, but I don't know if you of the interview with Carrie, she said, "I was not qualified for what Facebook needed me to do. I had no background in technology, no background in digital marketing." Facebook kind of lives in those worlds, right? Now, she's a very capable lady. She's leading at a chief executive level. Very, very capable lady, but feeling totally unqualified to do anything with Facebook. God tells her to resign her position. An assignment is coming to the end. And when she's faithful to that, 25 minutes later, a new assignment is delivered. She picks up her family. She moves into California. She takes on this massive project with Facebook. And what she said at the end, I don't know if you caught it, she said, "I believe I've been assigned to Facebook for the purpose of ministry." You see, first of all, for all of you in the marketplace, you need to understand you've been assigned by God there. You may not have my job as a pastor. You may not be a missionary or what feels like somebody in your mind who's called by God to something, but you need to understand you are very much called by God to the marketplace where you're at. God will use you in that location, both to make that company or that organization better, but also to minister to people there. You've been called there for the purposes of ministry. God's going to work through you. But the reason I wanted to share Nona's story is because I wanted to address the women in the room for just a moment. Because over the years of being in church ministry and campus ministry, I've watched a pattern play out many times with ladies. And I've seen many ladies get stuck behind the wall of qualification. I'm just going to be real raw and honest for a second, because of their gender. Because of their gender. Sometimes the church has sent a message to women that the only real assignment God can give them is to be a wife and a mother. First of all, how does that apply to any woman who's single? But it's just not true. I need you to understand, if you are a wife and mother, and maybe even a stay-at-home mom, you have an incredible assignment from God. My wife is in that role. That's what my wife does. She works a full-time job plus. I promise you, as a wife and mother, she has a very significant assignment. But listen to me, not all of you are necessarily called just to that. God may lead you to other assignments. Nona Jones was called by God, given a new assignment to go into one of the biggest organizations in the world and lead a massive initiative for them. And ladies, I'm just telling you that sometimes the church has sent you a message that you're not qualified for assignments within the church, not qualified for assignments within the marketplace, not qualified for assignments to lead things because of your gender. And I'm just saying, don't ever get stuck behind this wall. God is not worried about what you perceive as your deficiencies in this world. God is not looking at it and saying, I've got another man to do the job. He's looking to you. And he's got a significant assignment for you. We disqualify ourselves so often with things that we view as not being adequate enough, not being ready, not being good enough for God to use them. I'm just telling you guys, listen to me. God's call is what qualifies you for any assignment he's going to give you in your life. The greatest assignment very well may be in front of you, not behind you. And if you're faithful with what he gives you now, just like Joshua was, the assignments will get bigger over time. Would you bow your heads and pray with me?